What's up, everybody? John Bird III here. We're back again for another video. And in today's video, I made a comment in last week's video and said gear ratio don't matter. So guess what? We about to talk about that. But before we jump into that, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Also hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever a new video drops and hits the channel. So I got 3 reels right here, and we're gonna go down the wormhole just a little bit, and we're gonna talk about why gear ratio really doesn't matter. Now, we've all seen pros out there, they're using their stuff, and they're talking about, hey, I was throwing a bladed jig on a 7.5 to 1 gear ratio, and it was like, oh, well, that's just what I need. I need a 7.5 to 1 gear ratio. All of that is okay, but it doesn't really matter when it comes to the gear ratio. And I'm just about to tell you why. So I got 3 reels: Speed Spool RX, the Excel, Custom Pro. All 3 of these reels are all 7.5 to 1, but they're very different. And here's why. So the Speed Spool RX is a 200 size reel. At 7.5 to 1, it brings in 31 inches of line per turn. All right, so 31 inches of line per turn, 7.5 to 1, 200 size reel. The Excel is a 150 size reel that brings in 30 inches of line per turn, 7.5 to 1. And this Custom Pro I have right here is a 100 size reel, 7.5 to 1, and it brings in 28 inches of line per turn. So the reason why I said gear ratio doesn't matter is because what really matters is how many inches per full 360 turn does this reel bring in. That is what matters. So the numbers themselves: 7.5 to 1, 6.8 to 1, 7.1 to 1, 8.3 to 1, 10 to 1, 9.5 to 1. All that stuff don't matter. It's how many inches of line per full 360 turn. See how I'm keeping my hand on the same knob and I'm stopping at the same place. Full 360 turn, how many inches of line per full 360 turn does this reel bring in? That is what really matters. So when you have 3 different reel platforms that are 3 different sizes, the spool sizes are different. The Custom Pro is a 100 size reel that holds 90 yards of 12-pound fluorocarbon. The Excel is a 150 size reel that holds 110 yards of 12-pound fluorocarbon. And the Speed Spool RX is a 200 size reel that holds 120 yards of 12-pound fluorocarbon. So when you have 3 different spool sizes, all of that changes how much line the reel actually brings in. And that is what matters. Now, I had a guy comment on, and I actually had a conversation with one of my buddies probably a couple of weeks back. But I had a guy comment on my video the other day. Really good supporter of the channel, always comments. I really appreciate that. But he says he throws a hyperspeed. He cranks with it, bladed jigs, and all of that with a hyperspeed, which is a 9.5 to 1. And he says I can just slow myself down. That reel brings in 40 inches of line per full 360 turn. So if you think about it, you know how slow you have to go to really slow that bait down. Say you're throwing a bladed jig, to really slow that bait down, like you have to go extremely slow. And so today, in today's world, you're seeing faster gear ratios, your 9s, your 10s. Guys are using 7.5s to crank with and stuff like that, which is okay. But again, it goes back to the real size platform and how many inches of line per turn that reel brings in. That's why the gear ratio doesn't matter. It is the inches per turn that really matters. So I've heard pros say plenty of times, I could just slow myself down. That's why I use 7.5 to 1 for everything. And I'm like, I know myself personally. And I'm going to be 100% transparent. If it's 12 o'clock and I ain't got a fish in a boat and I'm fishing around grass, I'm throwing a bladed jig, you think I'm going to slow that bladed jig down? No, because my brain is now focused on what can I do to catch a fish. So I'm firing that sucker out there. I'm trying to cover water fast. And so say I'm doing it with the Speed Spool RX, which brings in 31 inches of line per turn. I'm like really cranking that thing because my brain is not even focused on how fast I'm turning the handle because I'm trying to figure out how to catch a fish. So To my guy that made that comment, that's why I say wait to this video. It's because you got to think about it. When you're in situations where your brain is not focused on how fast you're turning that handle because you're trying to catch a fish and it's 12 o'clock, you got one fish in the boat and it's getting closer to weigh in and you're in the hardest part of the day to try to catch a fish, you ain't thinking about how slow you turning that handle. You're trying to think about what you got to do to catch that fish. So put yourself in situations where you know that you're going to set yourself up for success. So anytime you go out and buy a brand new reel, and matter of fact, anytime you're talking to any pro staff guy and they're talking about their favorite reel and why or what reel they're using to throw a bladed jig, a hybrid hunter, whatever, swim worm, a jig, crankbait, whatever, and they talk about why they like that reel for that particular technique. So you can ask them, what's the gear ratio that you're using? And then they'll tell you, hey, I'm using a 7.5-to-1 Custom Pro to throw my bladed jigs. Ask them the second question. Ask them, how many inches per turn does that reel bring in? And some may know, some may not know. But if they tell you what reel they're using and what gear ratio they're using, you can go on lose.com, Tackle Warehouse, wherever, do your research and find out how many inches per turn that reel is bringing one full 360 turn of the full entire handle. And that way it'll help you better understand and grasp, all right, if I'm firing this reel out there and I'm using this smaller reel and it's bringing in 28 inches of line per turn, then it's like, okay. And so if you compare, so this is what I started doing, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because I don't have all the specs off top of my head. But I did a comparison between, like I said, just the different 7.5-to-1 gear ratios, different 7.5-to-1 gear ratios. I remember why I did this because at the time, I was throwing Gravel Dogs last season on a custom light, which is another 100 size reel, and it brings in 28 inches of line per turn, 7.5-to-1 gear ratio. I said I'm going to get a custom pro or two custom pros in 6.8-to-1, so that because I'm always in my brain says, oh, cranking 6.8-to-1, that's a perfect gear ratio. And then I had a conversation with one of my buddies a few months ago, and he was like, yeah, I crank on the custom light. I was like, that's a 7.5-to-1. He said, it don't matter. He said, it's the inches per turn. And it hit me. It was just like, duh, that's definitely what matters. And so this is just my confession, like I've even been so stuck on gear ratio. Man, no. Look for how many inches per turn, full 360 turn does that reel bring in, how much line it brings in on the full 360 turn. And that's going to better help you understand why somebody, a pro, a content creator, YouTuber guy who's giving tips and tricks like myself and some of the other guys out there, that is going to help you better understand or take you into their mindset as to why. So I used to always say when I'm looking for a reel, I used to look for a couple things. Spool size, like how much line does it hold? I always was look at that for a reel. I used to look at gear ratio. I'm not looking at gear ratio no more. I'm looking at inches per turn because that's what really matters. So all the gear ratios, it don't matter. I need to know how many inches per turn it brings in, right? And then I'm looking at the weight of the reel. So those are the three things I'm going to restructure myself on to look for whenever I'm looking at a reel. The first one, as far as like how much line it holds, that's kind of always been my deal. That kind of helped me determine what I'm gonna use it for. The third one that I said, as far as the weight of the reel, I just need to know. So because I'm always trying to use the lightest weight setups possible, so that I can cut down fatigue on my wrist, so I can fish longer throughout the day, and my arms and stuff aren't getting that tired. So that's why that's something that I always look at. But I'm restructuring how I look at gear ratio now. So I may say, oh, I'm gonna go with a 7.5-to-1, but is it really? I'm also looking at, all right, I need 30 inches of line per turn, right? At least 30. So if I said I'm looking for a reel, 7.5-to-1 gear ratio, but I'm like, I need at least 30 inches of line per turn. All right, that puts me in this ballpark where I can say, okay, cool. I can give myself, all right, do I want middle of the part line capacity or a lot of line capacity? So that means that I want a 150 size reel or 200, right? And it's like, all right, well, I want a 150 size reel. I don't really need a 200. Well, the Excel 7.5-to-1 brings in 30 inches of line per turn. And that's like, okay, this is the reel that I need. Or if it's like, if I want a couple more inches, still 7.5-to-1, let's say 31 inches, 32 inches. All right, I go with a Speed Spool RX. Speed Spool RX, 200 size reel, hold more line, brings in 31 inches of line per turn. And it's like, bam, that is what I need to know. So from now on, whenever you're looking at buying a new reel, keep that in mind. Don't worry about the gear ratio. Worry about inches per turn. So I know now I can grab one of my custom lights, put some 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon, tie on the square bill, and go crank it down the bank, knowing that it brings in 28 inches of line per turn. But I also know that if I want to go to a bigger size reel platform, I know then like Speed Spool RX, 31 inches of line per turn, I may have to slow myself down a little bit. So if my anxiety's high, it's 12 o'clock, I ain't caught a fish all day, and I'm cranking with a custom light or a custom pro that brings in 28 inches of line per turn, and I'm moving fast, I'm not really moving that bait that much further. I'm not taking up that much line compared to if I'm throwing like a Speed Spool RX or whatever. So that is why I say gear ratio doesn't matter. It's more so about the inches per turn. And so there are so many reels out there. You got different Speed Spool sizes. You got custom pros and customs. You got Hypermags. And then like for my non-loose guys, you got different sizes of Corrados. You got 300, you got a 200, you got a 150, you got a 70. Like, and so Daiwa got their 200s, their 100s, their 150s. Like all of those reels have different gear ratios, but what really matters is the inches per turn. How much line am I bringing on a full 360 turn of that handle? So that's it for today's video. I really kind of just want to go down that rabbit hole because I made that comment, because some people are probably going to be like, oh man, like he doesn't know what he's talking about. Think about it. Everybody can be, we have 3 different reels right here, and I just said they're all 7.5-1. But their spool sizes are different, and how much line per turn they bring in is totally different. So even though it says 7.5-1, that's just, it doesn't matter. What you need to know is how much line is that reel bringing in on the full 360 turn. So I hope this video is informative and helpful for you whenever you're going out there and buying a new reel, especially right around the Christmas time, because it's the holidays. Everybody gonna be getting new tackle, new rods, new reels, new baits and stuff like that. Take that in mind while you're going out there and buying a brand new reel this holiday season. I'm JB3. I got to get back to living a dream. I'll catch you later.